All right, should we get started?
All you.
Sounds good. So yeah, welcome everyone to the ASCE Seattle section meeting with student presentations and recognition of life members. I'm Aiden Bernal, co-host for tonight. I'm from Seattle University.
And I'm Peter Yu, also co-host. I'm from the University of Washington in Seattle.
So after we welcome you all in, the agenda for tonight, first we're going to go over the student chapter updates for the UW and SU ASCE chapters, and then we're going to go into the section announcements. After that, we're going to do some networking and the life member recognition. And then following that, we'll have the UW and SU student competition presentations. And then we'll do closing and a meeting after that. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, for being here. And let's get into it.
And just some basic housekeeping. I know that it's Zoom. We'd rather all do this in person if we wouldn't allow it, but unfortunately we're stuck with Zoom for the moment. So just some housekeeping. Please do keep your microphone muted if you're not speaking, and try to turn your video off during the presentations and recognition ceremony. If you have any questions, please ask that in the chat. Don't worry, we don't bite at all, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. Of course, you can be sure to utilize the gallery and speaker view that's in the top right of the screen, so you can definitely change the view to fit your needs.
Okay, so for the student chapter updates, Seattle University will be going first. I'll try and share my screen for our chapter update presentation. Let me start the slideshow and then see if I can share it on Zoom. Okay. So hopefully you all can see that. All right, so yeah, this is the chapter update for the Seattle University ASCE chapter, going over what's been happening the last year. So first of all, our student officers this year, I'm Aiden Bernal, third year at Seattle University, and I'm the president. And then our vice president is Daniel O'Brien, who's also a third year. Unfortunately, couldn't be here tonight, but yeah, it's the two of us right now. And just to go over some recent events that we've put on, we've tried to slowly get back into things as COVID restrictions have started to lighten at Seattle U. So at the end of last quarter, we had our second annual burnout workshop. You know, being a civil engineering major at university is not always easy. And so we tried to bring awareness and a little camaraderie and talk about those challenges, and then also provide a place for people to share their strategies for managing workload, stress, and how to grow as a civil engineering major at SU. And then a few weeks ago, we also had trivia night just right before midterms week. You know, just a sort of fun event, low stakes team competition, build some camaraderie like I was talking about, and, you know, relax a little bit before midterms. And they both went pretty well, and it was nice to finally get back into in-person ASE meetings, finally. In terms of reflecting on the past year and then future plans for next year, obviously this past year wasn't perfect. Lots of COVID restrictions made things difficult. For example, the fact that we couldn't meet in person sort of hurt our engagement compared to years in the past, because at the start of the year, we couldn't have anything in person. And of course, I mean, everyone, you know, online meetings are hard. So it made it difficult for people to engage. But once we got back to in person, things have started to look better. And unfortunately, the main downside for this year is that CLU wouldn't let us travel to Canada for the yearly competitions. And so we could not be involved in them due to COVID, but we are planning to work on that next year. And then right now we only have 2 officers. We're going to be recruiting more officers for next year because Danny and I are both in the same year and have all the same classes. And so we have the same times that we're busy, and we can't always work on things separately. But in terms of goals for the future for next year, we're really looking forward to it. And we're going to try and begin the next academic year in a way that we couldn't this year, and try and, get off running and build that engagement at the beginning of the year. And then we're very excited. We've seen a lot of interest within the student body to send a team to the Steel Bridge competition at the 2023 Student Symposium, which we're really looking forward to. We've had a lot of interest in people doing machine shop and things like that, get a really hands-on experience. And with that, we're going to try and rebuild that sense of camaraderie and community in the civil engineering department. So there's a lot to look forward to. And then that should be the end of our slideshow. So hopefully I will turn it over to UW now, and they'll go through their chapter updates as well.
Thank you, Aiden. Please give me a second. I'll share my screen really fast for our ASCE UW chapter updates. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Peter Yu. I'm the president here at ASCE UW student chapter, and I'm happy to attend tonight's annual May dinner section meeting. So over the last year, we've done a lot. Even though it is COVID, we are slowly returning to in-person. Certainly in-person, I think it's certainly very beneficial for everyone. So we've had a lot of lunch and learns, virtual and in-person, from many different companies. We've been real grateful to have all of these companies come in and give excellent presentations. We've also had some really good socials as well. We're also planning an upcoming spring social in just several weeks. We've also had several really good talks in civil engineering from several outstanding faculty members here at the UW. And of course, we had the very successful ASCE Pacific Northwest Regional Conference just a few weeks back. That went really well too. Hopefully we can have more in-person events in the future as the COVID situation gets better. And also, we had all new officers elected in just 2 months ago in March 2022. I'm one of them. So, of course, now you may see here, there's this may count maybe an error. There's two of me. I can tell you right now that this is my evil twin brother. Okay, but first of all, so I'm the new president here at ASCE UW, and I'm a sophomore in civil engineering, focusing in transportation, and I'm from Pullman, all the way on the east side of the state. For the vice president, we have Jake. He's also a sophomore in civil engineering. He's from Atlanta, Washington, and he really enjoys just being outdoors and playing sports. And of course, I'm also the secretary. I was the secretary last year as well, but I'll also be the de facto secretary for this year, at least. Again, this is my evil twin brother. Okay, so don't focus too much on him. Focus more on me than him. Okay, but he's also a sophomore, also in civil, just basically the same thing as me. And when we have Jay for the new treasurer and membership chair as well. Unfortunately, we don't have that many officers this year as compared to last year. So several people, including me, we've had to take on multiple positions, but that still works for us. He's also a sophomore in civil engineering. He's also minoring in aeronautics and astronautics. He's from Illinois, and Jay's from Illinois, and he enjoys doing concrete glue and also just only enjoying playing soccer and video games in his spare time. We also have Jaden as the new communications and social chair. She's also a sophomore in civil engineering. She's from Edmonds, really close to Seattle, and she just really enjoys hiking and doing these things in her spare time. We also have Kaylee as the new outreach officer. She's a junior, and she's also in civil engineering. She'll be focusing in transportation engineering, just like me. She's from Yakima, and these are her hobbies. And finally, we have Matthew, and he's the new fundraising chair. And he's also a sophomore in civil engineering. He's from Seattle, Washington. And of course, these are his hobbies as well. So we have 6 new officers as the new ASCE UW board this year. For future events, we're looking forward to working with the FE exam prep review in the summer. We also have bi-weekly membership meetings and socials that will be in person. Again, it's certainly a big relief to do everything in person than virtual on Zoom. And of course, we're looking forward to lunch and learns in the future, more lunch and learns in person. So that'll be really well. So if you have any questions or comments, please email us at asce@ulm.edu. We're still working on the website domain. Currently, Jake's working on that, so we don't have one set up immediately, but please email us if you have anything. So with that, that's everything. So thank you.
Okay, so with that, my name is Bobby. I'm with the Seattle YMF. I'm just going to do some Seattle section announcements and some upcoming events. So like the students, we are actually coming up to our board elections. So you should have gotten an email to vote for our future president-elect and director of technical committees. We are still looking for a secretary and treasurer. So please email Dawn at president@asce.org if you are interested or if you know anyone that could be. We're doing voting from May 9th through the 27th. So you'll see that in our newsletter, and we'll probably send out a reminder as well. We have several scholarships for students. I think these are both high school scholarships though, sorry. We have the Jones Scholarship, which is June 25th. Oh, this one's for the university students. I hope you're all paying attention. June 25th for juniors or higher in the civil engineering department, up to $2,000. And then the Seattle YMF also has our own scholarship. The deadline for the application is May 15th. If you know any high school seniors going into the STEM university path, please let us know, or please let them know as well. Some upcoming events. So our diversity committee is meeting on the 17th, which is next week. That'll be virtual. Our YMF is doing a joint networking event with SCAW at Red Hook Brew Lab that is in Capitol Hill. So please join us if you are able. We have an ATC 20 post-earthquake safety evaluation buildings training on the 27th. YMF and student picnic, it will be on June 1st at Volunteer Park. We have our June dinner meeting, which is our last for the year. It will be on June 8th at 5:30. It'll be virtual as well. And then we have a few more into the summer in June and August for the YMF. We have a backpacking trip and our volleyball league that we hope to start to have a team for. And then, as Peter alluded to, we do a summer FE review session for the students. So if you are interested in leading one of the disciplines, please let us know and reach out to the YMF, and you can actually message me here tonight, and I would love to volunteer you for something.
Okay, so now I guess we're gonna hop into some networking, get to know each other a little, and we'll send you all into some breakout rooms. So if you want, introduce yourself, your name, position, your company or school, and then if you have any ASCE involvement.
Wonderful. So I'm going to do this randomly, so hopefully it works. Oh, I might have made it. If you could just join a room. Ooh, this is rough.
Hello, everybody. My name is Homero Flores. I am the awards chair for the section, and I'm also the immediate past president of the section. One of my jobs is to do this live members recognition ceremony. Usually we have it in person and we invite the live members for the dinner. But since we're doing it virtual, we are only doing the recognition. And I reach out to our 19 live members that I will show them in the next slide. But before that, I wanted to briefly say what a live member is. So can we go back one slide? Thank you. So live members are members that have been with ASCE for 35 years, and the last 10 years they have been continuously paying their dues, and they have reached age of 65. And it's a way to recognizing that they have been involved with the section and supported the section for a long time. And one of the important things about the ceremony of doing it with the student competitions is to be able to bring together the two ends of our careers. I mean, a lot of life members are still practicing and some of them are retiring, but and the students are starting. And so it's very helpful for life members to give share a little bit of their career experience with the students. And so usually we have a few of the life members sharing some of their experiences or sharing something that they wish someone told them when they were starting their career or when they were students. And so with that, we move to the next slide, please. And we have 19 members that I will say their names, and I apologize for probably saying them wrong because I don't know how to pronounce all of their names. I don't see them in our participant list, so I don't think that they were able to come this time. If any of you is here, please let me know and you could say a few words. So there are Sherry Jones, Jay Regent Striff, William Robert Alwell, Michael John Shoemaker, Connor Felice, Paul Michelle Craig, Bernard Lee Argraf, Kenneth Dean, Lisa Diane Tobin, Stephen Douglas Plant, Scott Edward Manken, Carl James Enfield, Christopher Peter Schumacher, Richard Irving Kittler, Edwin Shepard Fields, Mark Elliott Gordon, Diane Hilmo, Paul David Tappel, and Judd Godwin Thorsey. And one of them is a fellow, Connor is a fellow, and John Godwin Thorsey, it's a distinguished ASCE member. And some of them have been involved directly in the section, so as volunteers of the section. And so I want to thank them and congratulate them. And also we are very interested in having them getting involved in the section so that they can share their experience in their career and through their years at ASCE, so that experience serves our community. And also we tie a broad spectrum of members along our career path as civil engineers. So once again, is any of these new members on the video call? So hearing none, I pass it on to Peter.
So I'll take it over because I think we're going to have SU go first for the student competition results. So yeah, we'll introduce the places for the SU student competition for this year. So in first place, we have the Lucky Peak Powerhouse Seismic Retrofit for Seattle City Light. And in second place is the three-way intersection improvement for Snohomish County. And in third place is the Larned Apartment Seismic Retrofit for Community Route Housing / Swenson Chez Faget. And of course, big thank you to all the judges, Mike, Megan, Keith, Eric, Matthew, and Zach, for spending their time to help judge these competitions. And I believe we will also be hearing from the first place competition placement after this.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to see our presentation. We are Seattle University team CEE 22.2, and we are presenting on our seismic evaluation and retrofit of Lucky Peak Powerhouse for Seattle City Light. For our outline today, we'll be going over our project management, background, building details, evaluation, and mitigation alternatives. For project management, we have Robert Cochran as our Seattle City Light liaison. For our faculty advisor, we have John Smith. For our project coordinator, we have Dr. G. I am Mungjoyan Tim, and I'm currently the project manager. And we also have Mia Pizito, who is currently absent today.
Hello, I'm Roberto Cordero Aguilar.
I'm Eugenio Sanchez.
Mauricio Ayala.
So some background on Lucky Peak. It's located in Boise, Idaho, approximately 11 miles from downtown Boise, and it sits between the Boise River and Lucky Peak Lake. On the right, we see an aerial view of the powerhouse and its adjacent office building that we analyzed. And this graphic that just popped up will be used throughout the presentation to show you where we are looking at. So Lucky Peak isn't like technically owned by Seattle City Light. It's just part of something called a long-term hydro contract. So they have a long-term agreement which gives them the rights to all the power output from the powerhouse. And the powerhouse itself is part of this bigger project. So that dam you see there was built in the 50s, and it created the reservoir, which is used for agriculture in the nearby valley, as well as to help the powerhouse. There's also a recreational area that's mostly used in the summer months, and finally, the powerhouse itself down below. So this is just kind of how the powerhouse works. So water will flow in from the reservoir, spin the turbines, which power the generators, and then the electricity from that goes outside to the transformers. There's a switch yard right next to the powerhouse, which we did not analyze. That was not in the scope of our work. And finally, the water flows out into the Boise River, and highlighted in red is the actual structure that we did look at. So here we see the north face of the office building and the powerhouse. The office building is 17 feet tall and 34 feet wide, while the powerhouse is 43 feet tall and 76 feet wide. This is a picture when it was under construction. It started in 1984 and finished in 1988. The powerhouse is 168 feet long and sits on this big concrete structure that's 84 feet tall. And that concrete structure in turn sits on site class A soil, which is hard rock. So it will move with the ground in case of a seismic event. And for evaluation, we used ASCE 41-17, ASCE 7-16, ACI 318-19, and AISC 360-16.
In order to use ASCE 41-17, we had to categorize our structure. As requested by Seattle City Light, we have a risk category type 4. This is similar to hospitals or police stations. Also, as requested by Seattle City Light, we'll be using the basic performance objectives equivalents to new standards as opposed to existing standards. And then the seismic hazards we'll be using will be BSC 2N and BSC 1N. So we started off by conducting a tier 1 checklist to preliminary identify any non-compliant structural items. And then we moved on to a tier 3, which is just a more in-depth analysis of all our structural items. Again, from ASCE 41-17, we have the BSC 2N, which is for a less common, more intense earthquake. And the basic performance objectives here will be life safety performance. On the other hand, the BSC 1N is for a more common, less intense earthquake, and the basic performance objectives will be immediate occupancy. It's an important thing to note that these basic performance objectives are as requested by Seattle City Light, since they don't directly align with what ASCE 41-17 details. As shown here is a design pseudo-acceleration spectrum. In other words, it's the acceleration of a structure due to the earthquake. Important thing to note here is a peak response acceleration of 0.26 G, comparing that to the original design value of 0.17 G. Another thing to note is the period of our structure. In the longitudinal direction, we have a period of 0.24 seconds. In the transverse direction, we have 0.46 seconds.
All right, so going into the building details, we have an office building that sits adjacent to the powerhouse on the east side. And then here we have a plan view of that office building. It is 34 feet wide and 84 feet long. The office building is adjacent to the powerhouse. It leads into it. And then the black lines there are the concrete shear walls. And then sitting on top of the office building, we have the elevator penthouse as well.
So this is a view from inside the powerhouse, and we can see a couple of the moment frames. There's 9 of them total. The beams are W24 by 76, and the columns are made up of 2 shapes that are spliced together, a W21 by 101 on top and a W36 by 230 on bottom. Circled are all the connections. They're symmetrical, so it's exactly the same on the other side, and all those connections are welded. And down below there are 2 generators below grade. So also there are 4 brace frames in the powerhouse. This next picture shows it up closer. And we can see that for the top brace frame, it's a W12 by 26 beam. And for the bottom frame, it's a W12 by 40. And the columns of the brace frames are the same as the columns of the moment frames. And the diagonal members are W12s by 26s. Each brace frame also consists of 6 different connections, and those connections are bolted and welded.
So in order to first determine our demands of each member to do our assessment, we had to use a structural analysis program called SAP 2000, and we implemented gravity loads from the roof. And then we used the peak response spectrum, and we put it into the model, and then we can run it and we get an equivalent lateral force induced on the building. And as you see below, that's the design earthquake SA, and it kind of can show that would be kind of the building's behavior during the earthquake. During our tier 1 assessment, one of the major components was the adjacent building criteria. So as you notice, there's the powerhouse on the right and the office building and elevator penthouse on the left. And there is an existing ½ inch gap between these two. And we had to make sure that the deflection of the powerhouse was going to be less than this ½ inch gap for both VSE 2N and 1N earthquakes. And we used SAP 2000 to determine these deflections and found that they were less than ½ an inch. So we're okay. And we were able to treat both these buildings separately. For our tier 3 design criteria, we had to determine and categorize whether the members we are using are force controlled or deformation controlled. We determined that the force controlled members were connections, beams, and columns. Force control members are basically members that we don't allow failure to, as well. And then for deformation control, we determined that the diagonal braces were deformation controlled, and this basically allows the member to yield, and we are allowing more ductility in it. We'll be presenting demand over capacity ratios, DCRs. And any DCRs that are less than 1, we do not need any retrofits for.
Moving on to the brace frame analysis, we started off by looking at the diagonal members. For the diagonal members, we looked at tension and compression. And in here you can see that controlling DCR. For tension, it was a DCR of 0.09, and then for compression was a DCR of 0.16, and compression ended up controlling. Next, we move on to the columns. For the columns, we looked at tension, compression, and moment. And in here, again, you can see the controlling DCRs. For tension, of a value of 0.05, for compression, 0.07, and then the most significant DCR was due to the moment with a value of 0.12, but still less than 1. Moving on to the beams of the brace frames. For the beams, we looked at moment and shear, as well as tension and compression, but tension and compression were really insignificant. And in here, the DCRs, and it's worth mentioning that these DCRs coming from the BSC2 and seismic hazard. So for the moment, we had a DCR of 0.64, and then for shear, a DCR 0.04. Finally, we have the connections for the brace frames. And as mentioned, they're bolted and welded. So we looked at tension for these, and then DCR of these were 0.51, still under 1, so no retrofits were needed. Next, we have the moment frame analysis. We looked at the columns. For columns, we looked at tension, compression, moment, and shear. Even though we evaluated these individually, the control in DCR was due to the combined axial and moment. So axial meaning coming from tension and compression. And it might be a little bit alarming. We have a DCR of 1.0, but when calculating our capacities of these members, we're really conservative. So that's why the DCR is only 1, but still not over 1, which is still compliant. We have the beams. For beams as well, we looked at tension and compression, but they were insignificant compared to moment and shear. And in the DCRs for moment of 0.73, and then for shear, a DCR 0.1, still under 1. Finally, we have the connections. Because these are moment frames, the connections were moment controlled. So the DCR for the connections, the highest DCR we got was a value of 0.92. Again, it might be a surprise, it's under 1, so no retrofits were needed.
So after verifying that everything in the powerhouse was compliant, we moved on to the office building, where we have roof trusses that hold up the roof, and these roof trusses occur every 4 feet in the east-west direction. And then here you kind of see how that truss is shaped. It holds up the metal decking, and we have an angle there that connects the truss to the concrete shear walls of the office building. And so here we have an elevation view of that L shape, and we have bolts that occur at every 1 foot. So here's an illustration of how the forces would act on that L shape. We have out of plane forces acting on it. And then we also have an in-plane force that would also act onto that member. And so these forces would produce a moment on that angle, and we wanted to check whether or not that DCR was compliant or not. And so we used Hilti Profis to model the L shape, and we got a DCR of 0.67, which is less than 1, so we're okay there. One problem that did show up during our site visit was we noticed that the north and south face walls were going to experience a greater wind force than anywhere else. So in the end, wind force ended up controlling here, and that's acting on the north and south walls of our building. So if we take a look inside, our end moment frames are going to be experiencing a lot of that force, and we're concerned about the W24/76 beams that are at the ends of the building. And so if we zoom in, we can see that the top flange is being braced by the roof purlins as the purlin sits on top of the beam, but the bottom flange isn't supported. Instead, what we have is a column that transfers that wind load up to the bottom flange. So the bottom flange is not braced at all. And so our main concern here is that the beam is going to experience some weak axis bending as illustrated here. We're going to have the wind force that's going to cause that our beam to deform. So in order to mitigate this problem, we have suggested adding L shapes that would connect from the bottom flange all the way up to the MC purlins that support the roof. So in summary, we checked the brace frame members and the connections and verified that they were all okay. Then we looked at the moment frame members and connections and also verified that they were all compliant. And then we looked at the office building roof anchorage and determined that that was also okay. And then finally, we recommended to Seattle City Light to add angles to add stability to the bottom flange of the end frame beams. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We will be answering any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? All right. Guess I will stop sharing.
You can add questions in the chat if you don't want to speak up.
Okay, so if there are no questions, hi everyone. Next up, we the results from UW. The first way is assessing impact of precipitation and surface air temperature on water levels from Burra, Nadim Mirza. Second place, we have identifying BRUs at intersections with early stage LiDAR features from Shui In. Third place, we have real-time lot system for tracking by edge computing and multi-camera reidentification from Hall or Frank. Yeah. And again, I'd like to thank all of our judges, Phil, Katerina, and Amy for taking their time and expertise to helping judge the competition. So thank you. And today we have Burger's presentation. So we please share your screen whenever you're ready.
I cannot share screen. It says it's disabled.
Give me 1 second. I think I need to give you permission. Okay, try it now. Sorry.
Yeah, I can do it now. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Brita, graduate student of University of Washington, where my research focus is hydrology. And today I'm going to be presenting on assessing the impacts of precipitation and surface air temperature on groundwater level. So let's just start with little basics that what is groundwater. So groundwater is any water that is present beneath the earth's surface. This is the simplest definition. It is present in rock, soil pore spaces, and the fracture of rock formation. And to help your brain, the picture at the right hand side shows where the groundwater is present, like all the blue that represents over here, fractured rock and gravels, and beneath unsaturated zone, this is all groundwater. Some other basic definitions like precipitation and surface air temperature. So for surface air temperature, the air temperature you are feeling right now, and when it is measured 2 meter above 2 meter height above the surface, it is called surface air temperature. And precipitation is basically the quantity of water that is deposited on earth in shape of hail, mist, rain, sleet, snow. And what are these? Just for the visualization, you can see it in the picture. So we must be thinking that why it's important for us to study, why as civil engineer, environmental engineers, it's important for us to study. So groundwater plays a very significant role in hydrological cycle. And what is hydrological cycle? So it's nothing but the circulation of water in Earth atmosphere system. So groundwater is a very important indicator to let us know that where we can place our reservoirs, how much water is available for the crop production, how much land have the storage capacity, and it's really important to know the climate change in the region. For example, it is very important indicator to know that how much human footprint is involved in a particular region, or that in what range from like how rapidly the water is depleting, groundwater is depleting, and what are the factors involved in it. We'll get to that in a minute. But there's another very important use of groundwater, that is about 30% of all readily available fresh water in the world is groundwater. So it's really important for our drinking water. So we do not want our land to go or to run out of groundwater. So the factors I was talking about. So groundwater system or study is not easy as it looks. It's really a complex process, and it involves many of the factors like temperature, precipitation, water table, river discharge, soil heterogeneity, water storage in ice and in shape of snow, evaporation, radioactive exchange, quality of watershed, and a lot of other factors. But we are over here are focusing on temperature and precipitation. So it comes to our research object. So my research object was that how does air temperature affect groundwater, and how does precipitation affect groundwater levels? And are these two factors are really good meteorological factors to depict or to indicate the groundwater depth or not? To do that, I selected the study location and study period as lower mid Columbia River Basin. I specifically selected Walla Walla Mill Creek Walla Walla gauge station of USGS, and I selected time period from 2012 to 2019. I'll be very honest, that was the only data available in USGS. And this gauge station has drainage area 59.6 miles square. And why I selected this region? What was the reason for selecting this river basin? So it comprises of 7 states and 1 Canadian province. The 7 states are Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and it helps to produce 80% of the production of energy to these states, and it is also used for drinking purposes and irrigation purposes. That's why this river basin is really critical to understand, and its groundwater behavior is really critical. So what were the methods I used? So I used DayMet data, which was provided to me by one of my colleagues, and I used Jupyter Notebook and Python as my coding language. I used the statistical model and methods as trend analysis and multiple linear regression. I used trend analysis to study changing trends of groundwater between 2012 to 2019 due to the precipitation and air temperature. And I used multiple linear regression to know the contribution of each variable to the total model. So let's have a look at our raw data first. So over here on x-axis, I have water here, and over y-axis, I have depth to groundwater in feet. If any one of you have noticed that this y-axis is unusual, right? It's decreasing rather than increasing. Why is that? I won't trick you guys. So the reason is that these values, we are measuring groundwater depth from the surface. So for example, this guy right here is almost 30 meters down the surface. And this is the depth over here is 38 meters approximately down the surface. So that's why this is decreasing rather than increasing. And one more interesting thing to note is over here, the ground depth in 2012 was pretty good. And till 2016, it was still doing good. Even the depth was increasing, the groundwater was recharging. But then what happened in 2017? How come the depth of the groundwater changed suddenly? Did the rare event happen, or what could be the reason? To investigate that, I also had a look at other raw data, that's air temperature and precipitation. That precipitation rate is in millimeter and our mean temperature is in degrees C. And I observed that there are some unusual trend in 2017 over here as well. So upon investigation, we got to know that there was some issue with the measurement. The gauge wasn't working properly and needed maintenance. So while noting the data, it's really important that your instrument is giving you right readings. Anyway, moving on. I just set my trend analysis hypothesis. My null hypothesis was if slope of regression is 0, then I'm going to accept my null hypothesis. If not, I'm going to accept my alternative hypothesis. But what was my null hypothesis on alternative hypothesis? My null was groundwater depth does not change with air surface temperature and with precipitation. And my alternative hypothesis was groundwater depth increases as precipitation increases. So after using statistical model, after doing the coding on Python using data from DayMet and USGS, I got this beautiful graph right here, the groundwater depth over here, and the precipitation is right here. So this is the comparison graph for groundwater depth and precipitation. The blue lines right here are upper and lower prediction intervals that our future values will be around in these ranges. And the green ones are our current population or current sample ranges. And the red line, the purple one is our null hypothesis, and the red line over here is my linear regression model. So it is the most useful line for prediction or depiction of my results. So what I see over here, the slope of regression line is negative 37.5, which means I can accept my alternative hypothesis, which is by the increase of precipitation, my groundwater decreases. And the question over here is, can I confidently reject my null hypothesis? The answer is no, because if I see my upper slope confidence limit and lower slope confidence limit, it is between -98 to 23.4, which means our null hypothesis, which is slope equals to 0, exists between this range. So we cannot confidently reject our null hypothesis. Similarly, in this case, the lines depicting indicating the same things as I described above. My slope was linear regression model slope was 4.4, so I can accept my alternative hypothesis that as air surface temperature increases, my groundwater levels increases as well. And I can reject, but over here, I cannot reject my null hypothesis confidently either, because my slope ranges over here from -17 to +17 to -8.1. So, and again, I also used multiple linear regression. I normalized my data and I plotted it against the raw data. So the good news over here, the groundwater depth is increasing. We saw this using multiple linear regression. But we concluded that since we cannot reject our null hypothesis confidently, so these two indicators are not very good. The precipitation and air surface temperature are not very good indicators for groundwater. So we need to include more things. We need to include our recharge basin area, like we need to include more stations. We need to include our seasonality effect, that during summers and winters, the precipitation and temperature changes. So we have to include that how that is impacting our data. And we also have to include the human footprint, that how much well drawdown is happening in the region. This can make our results more conclusive, but right now our results are inconclusive, and we concluded that these two meteorological factors are not enough for predicting the ground water levels. So in order to stop people to pull harder our groundwaters and to knock some senses in their brains, we need to have more detailed investigation on this. And here I'm going to thank Devin and Stephen for helping me with the data. And there are some other acknowledgements right here. And I'm happy to take any questions and feedback. Thank you. Yeah, and you guys can also write questions in the chat.
No questions.
I think Robert has some questions.
I guess this applies a little bit more broadly, but was there any assessment of different types of infrastructure that could help recharge aquifers, or different mechanisms to recharge aquifers?
That's a good question. Not in this study, but in one of the another projects I was doing on Oglala aquifers. So there are people, so I would say not any infrastructures, but there are a lot of policy making that's happening and a lot of research that's going on for that region. So I think for groundwater recharge, you can, like, more infrastructure, more reservoirs are not really helpful. So over here, the need is to like extract or like remove infrastructure rather than creating more. So I think that's what I figured out.
Thank you.
So I had a question. Do you think that snow, I don't know if there's snow in this basin, but do you think more snow would result in more groundwater recharge?
That's a really good question. Yes, snow really helps in groundwater recharge, because when snow melts, it works as a base flow and then it recharges water. But here's a tricky issue over here, that we do not have. So most of the data is we use in hydrology these days is we use remote sensing, like satellite techniques. But NASA is working on this project called NASA Dig Deep, where they're trying to launch a satellite which can calculate snow water equivalent, that as soon as snow melts, how much water will be present as a base flow. So when that will happen, then we will be able to like have data that how much snow is contributing in the base flow and groundwater recharge. But yeah, that happens, but we do not have like sufficient resources and calculations and data for that. But NASA is working on that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Homero, I also see you had another question for the SU team. Did you want to ask them?
Yeah, I asked them and I got a reply.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you did.
Yeah, but it was on the chat. So I was asking why they looked only at the roof and one direction of the office building. And
I can re-answer the question so everyone else can hear, but the answer was that we only looked at that one direction in the roof. First, we only looked at the roof because the office building consists of concrete shear walls, and considering that Boise, Idaho is a low seismic area or zone, these concrete shear walls are very stiff, so they're not going to experience that many force to the point where it was kind of worth checking. We did analyze that it was sufficient, so that's why we only looked at the roof. And we only looked at that direction of the roof because we noticed that in the other direction, the direction perpendicular to the one we looked at had additional L shape supporting the roof, that which was missing in the direction we focused on. And that's what raised the concern that maybe it was not adequate to support the seismic force in that direction.
thank you. Yeah, I had received the answer before, but thank you again.
Does anyone else have any questions for our presenters? Okay. So I'm going to close up the meeting. I want to thank everyone for being here, especially on a Wednesday night. And I appreciate all the students for all your hard work on your presentations. It means a lot for us. I wish we did have some more life members here for you to interact with, but you guys did an amazing job. And we really do appreciate this. This is an annual event we've done for a very long time, before my time in ASCE. So I really appreciate you all being here tonight. I also want to thank Peter and Aiden. I kind of told you to host this meeting, and so I really appreciate you taking the time out. Professional organizations are super important for your career, so remember that as you are all starting to graduate and go out into the working world. And then I will close out with saying we have several upcoming events. I'm not going to read this again, it's the same as before, but if you have any questions, I will stick around after the call. Our next dinner meeting is on June 8th, so please sign up for that. It's about the Surfside apartment collapse in Florida. I'm going to say that's right. Okay, a lot of good head nods. And we'd really appreciate you joining us for that as well. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time from the Seattle section, from the YMF, UW, and Seattle U. Thank you for being here, and thank you to our life members. It's quite an accomplishment.
And Bobby, did you mention that there was prize money for the student competitions?
Oh yeah, I should say that too. So this is not just goodwill of the students. This is also it's a prize involved for the first, second, and third presentations. I think first it's $750, then second's $500, and third is $250. And that's graciously provided by the ASCE section, Seattle section. We think it's really important to give back to our students and all their hard work. So I will be reaching out to both UW and Seattle U to help distribute the prizes, but it's well earned. You guys did a great job. I'm sad I didn't get to see the second and third presentations, but you guys all did an amazing job tonight, and I know you guys put a lot of hard work into it. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.